Good evening, folks. I'm going to call to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Board of Directors of the Marin Municipal Water District for August 15th. Could we get a roll call, Terry?
Yes. Vice President Ranjiv Kush, Director Larry Russell, Director Matt Sampson,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
and President Schmidt.
Here. All right. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Do we have any comments on items not on the agenda?
I do see one raised hand, Miss Christy Denton Cohen. I just want to make sure that you're aware this is regarding tonight's agenda. Go ahead, Ms. Cohen, I've unmuted you.
Okay, thanks. This is not on the agenda tonight.
No, we haven't gotten to that. It's right immediately following. This is just to
Gotcha.
adopt the agenda.
Okay.
Just comments regarding adoption
Sorry.
of the agenda first,
Okay.
just to clarify things.
All right, we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
I have a couple. So one, I think, given what we've seen in Lahaina and what I keep hearing from everyone I talk to here in Marin and all around our country, we should have on our agenda as soon as possible, I'd suggest, a detailed understanding of what is our emergency response when there is some sort of catastrophic event or even a mediocre fire damaging event. Any possible thoughts about how we're going to go about it and with regional experts inside our firm and outside. So I'd love to do that, especially given how the water issues in Lahaina really put a light on that. And we saw it in Sonoma too. So my second item is a comment that I do believe that we have now blown past. No, I do believe we blew past our July deadline with negotiating the contract with our represented workers. And I believe that we should agendize, or hopefully be done before we have to agendize, a new date. I think the longer that this negotiation is prolonged, the worse it looks for everybody. The more polarizing it is, the more blaming that both sides have. And I believe that the issues are completely resolvable. We just need to get around the table and have the decision makers around the table and come together and come to a unified agreement, because the longer this goes on, the worse it gets for us. And if we do, I hope, I wish, and I expect that this will be done in the next couple of weeks, and that we come out of it not as an us versus them, as staff versus leadership or board or pointing at each other, but that we come together as like one group, one organization that is set out to achieve an incredible amount of work and a mission that we all believe in strongly. And we can only do it if we do it together and not blaming each other and pointing fingers at each other. So I'm hoping and expecting that the coming years is going to be really an exceptional time as we bring in new people, and the sooner we get this negotiation done, the better. And if we can't get it done super fast, then I think we got to come up with another date to achieve it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the agenda?
Not on the agenda.
Okay. Could we get a roll call vote?
Yes. Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
And President Schmidt.
Aye. Okay, now public comments on items not on the agenda.
Yes, Miss Christy Denton Cohen.
Okay, I think Jed kind of beat me to it. I do have some prepared remarks, and he is my representative, so he must be reading my mind. I want to say good evening to everyone first. I don't think anyone has heard the news about Lahaina without feeling deep sadness and concern. For many of us, it's personal, whether we have family and friends in Maui or we have experienced fire here. But after reading yesterday's New York Times story called "As the Inferno Grew, Lahaina's Water System Collapsed," many of us are also feeling deep concern for our own water supply. The article points out what contributed to the collapse of Lahaina's water supply, including decreased water pressure, water leaking out of the system, melting pipes, useless hydrants, no electricity, and really bad communication. In Marin, we face similar drought and high wind conditions over the years, so we can relate to that too. I know Marin Water is engaged in protecting the watershed, but we could use some reassurance and up-to-date communications about any plans the district has in the event of a similar conflagration that spreads from the mountain into our cities. Communication is key on many levels. We need reassurance that our emergency plan is current and water will be available. We need to know, what are Marin Water's emergency resilience and response plans? If power lines go down, what kind of backup power is available? What happens if our pipes melt? We've been reminded many times of our aging infrastructure. Do you have backup phone numbers and ways to contact any contractors such as electrical or somebody else so you can reach them in an emergency? What happens if cell service is down? What are the plans for mutual aid? One thing I really want to make clear, and please understand, I'm not saying you don't have these plans. Many changes were made by water districts following the Berkeley fires in 1991, which faced many of the same problems that Lahaina just did. We just need to be reminded of what your plans are. You need to fill in any gaps in those plans that become evident after an event like what just occurred in Lahaina. Please put your report on this as an agenda item for the next board meeting. We are definitely flying into fire season here. And let us know how you plan to address these issues. We need to hear from you. As Lahaina has emphasized, good communication is key. Tragedy follows if it's not there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker is Miss Mimi Willard.
Hi, yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So just want to remind you that a few months ago, there was on the agenda at a board meeting, a renewal of approval for the board handbook and guidelines. And at the time it was suggested, I think perhaps by Director Smith, that we should, or that you should have a follow-up meeting sometime, like in the quiet period, perhaps this summer or whatever, to pick that item up again and take a look at broadly whether it's covering all of the things that you want to have covered in it. I personally would nominate 3 items to be looked at. I'm sure there are more. One would be a look at the dual notification of meetings, and particularly how many committee meetings are being attended and need to be attended by the full board as opposed to subcommittee. So I think that needs a look. Number 2, I think that you really need to look at your policy with regard to director healthcare. As things currently stand, the district treats the directors as employees and puts them in the same plan. And I think that muddies the independence of your stature as oversight. And I think that just needs to be turned into history. And then number 3, I think it would be really good to codify a stronger and more comprehensive set of policies that relate to conflicts of interest, and not merely a modest disclosure of financial interests. Thank you for considering that, and I hope to see something on that front in the future.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Larry Minikes.
Yes, good evening. I just want to say I very much appreciate Christie's comments and concerns. And what we're really looking at are two separate but interrelated issues. One is watershed preparedness and resiliency, and the other is the resiliency of our infrastructure. And I think it would take more than one meeting to cover both. That's all I wanted to add. I thought the comments this evening have been excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thank you. Okay, directors and general managers announcements. I'll start to the left. Larry.
Give me a minute. I have one. And I did it.
Okay. Jed.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to join Sean at and Adrian at a meeting in Marin City, and Alicia, I'm sorry. with Terry Green updating them on the new grant that we have that we are receiving, that will be implementing miles of new pipes in Marin City, and the timeline to get it done, get started, which we hope by the beginning of 2024. This grant will also, I'm super excited and super interested, will involve an investigation into the laterals that go beyond our meter into the buildings in Marin City, which, although not our requirement to be able to, or to need to support them, we're going to try to help out that community as much as we can, and having some of these grant dollars go that way is fantastic, and partnering with the county in that effort is great. I'm proud of Marin and Ben, your work to be able to bring this together. And we're also doing some similar work in the Canal District, which is terrific. And although that'll be another year down the road, I thought Sean and Alicia and Adrian did an outstanding job at the meeting. Thank you.
Larry, you ready yet? No. Okay.
I'm just-
Okay. We'll wait. Go ahead.
I'm good tonight. Thank you.
Okay. I have nothing. So Larry, we can move over to Ben for directors, for general manager.
I'm working to give him a bit of time here.
Okay.
I'm trying to come up, but I don't have an item this evening.
I'll just read it. Okay, I attended the WAC meeting on Monday. And there were a bunch of issues about things like water resiliency and where they're going with the Jacob study. And it was all pretty much stuff we've heard before. The interesting part was that there was a whole section of their presentation on the Potter Valley, in which they made no mention whatsoever of the deal that they later announced that day regarding their plan to put a partnership together to buy out the Potter Valley. I thought that was a little strange, being they had the entire TAC, the entire WAC, and they made no effort to inform anyone. I talked to Paul Sellier about it. There was a meeting with the TAC later in the day where they disclosed it under secrecy. Again, I don't understand what the big secret was, because they then announced it in a press release later. It's a good thing. That's why I don't understand why they weren't happy to talk about it. But they made the decision that it wasn't relevant, or it wasn't public information or something like that. In any case, the rest of the stuff was pretty routine for the biological opinion expires in September of this year, and they're looking forward. It was originally issued in 2008. They're looking to redo it, and they're starting the ball rolling on redoing it. So that was the gist of it.
Is that it, Larry?
That's it.
Okay. Also want to report that as part of our infrastructure funds that we've secured for our Marin City and Canal communities, we had a meeting with the community resilience coordinator in the Multicultural Center of Marin to talk about the project, which was great, because I think that obviously these investments in these communities are really important, and the funds that we secured to help cover them is great for our fiscal budget. And I think also just in terms of coordinating, these are communities that have high traffic patterns during times of the day, and to the extent that we can do some coordination about when we're doing work on streets, small things like that, that I think really show a sensitivity and awareness to the communities that we're trying to serve. So I think the outreach is really appreciated, and I really appreciate the district staff who helped put together the presentation and make the time. Okay. If there are no other announcements, I'm going to move us on to our consent calendar. Can I get a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any public comments on the consent calendar?
There are none.
Okay, could we get a roll call vote, Terry?
Yes. Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the regular calendar. Update on water resiliency roadmap.
Good evening. Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. Just give me a moment while I pull up the right presentation. Hooray. And great. Okay, so quick water supply resiliency update this evening. I do want to introduce the gentleman to my left. This is Xavier Arias with Woodard and Curran. We're fortunate to have him here with us this evening. He will be providing us program management support for two of our long-term water supply options, conveyance and storage. And Xavier has 35 years of water resources and engineering experience. He was also the director of engineering, and I'll keep this as discreet as I can, of a large municipal East Bay utility district. So as the chief engineer there, you can imagine they have several dams related to our storage project and direct experience there, and of course, large conveyance projects as well. Xavier will be helping us with the presentation on those two items this evening.
Good evening. I'm President Schmidt and members of the board. Glad to be here. It's really a pleasure working on your really important projects with your great staff.
Okay, so tonight we'll just touch on, reminding ourselves the roadmap. Kind of, we'll try to talk a little bit about what the projects are. It feels like it's a little while for me since I've been before the board, which is kind of a long gap of maybe a month or month and a half or something like that. So we'll refresh my memory, if not yours, on what some of these roadmap projects are. The early action, long term, and we'll get into some schedule and funding work before talking about next steps. So briefly on our stream release project. So this is our goal to more accurately meet our stream flow requirements. And this project will ultimately replace a manual process that we currently use right now. We go to the internet, we look at the stream flow, and then we call up the operations center and try to adjust the flow accordingly. In the summertime, it works very well. Obviously, for obvious reasons, there's not many other inputs other than our releases. But in the shoulder seasons and in the winter, it can be challenging for us to accurately meet those stream flow requirements. So to do that, we're going to capture that USGS stream flow data and bring it back to our SCADA, and we'll do some controls magic, algorithm, so that we can manipulate the release valve in an appropriate way so that we can hit our release targets. We've obviously done a few things since inception of this idea, and if there's any comments, just jump in while I'm going.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the modernization of our approach to releasing flows. Do you have, or will at some point we develop some guidelines for the speed with which, the rate at which we increase or decrease flows, now that we'll have a finer level of precision?
Yeah, so a great question. So imagine we have a written document that describes, right, from WR 9517, how quickly we can change flows today. Mm-hmm. We need to capture that information when we translate it into our algorithm. So there'll be rate of change alarms and things like that for us to be aware of. It's not a trivial undertaking.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
So we've ticked off a few of the boxes. We did introduce this topic to the Technical Advisory Committee, the Lagunitas Creek Technical Advisory Committee, and as you might imagine, a lot of interest there. So we'll be following up at the appropriate time with them. We've already met with USGS to understand what they're thinking in terms of how we can capture their data, and we've been talking with state parks about placing our equipment. They're currently reviewing sort of our easement request. Under an existing easement, I think we'll be able to install the equipment that we need. And Balance Hydro, along with ESA, will be helping us with the environmental aspects. So then, in terms of schedule, so we've already chosen the site. Essentially, we've we're on the way getting equipment and permissions to install the equipment. And then we're going to be looking at the data and the telemetry, how we're going to capture that data. And then installing the equipment towards the end of October, most likely. And project completion will involve, as long a period as we can of calibration. And we'll be monitoring this kind of in parallel with our manual process. We're not just going to go hands-free. We're going to make sure this thing is tracking appropriately. So there'll be a lot of controls around this.
That's great. Paul, when you have met with the Lagunitas TAC, could you bring back the issues and concerns that were raised so we just understand how that really important group feels about the project, any concerns that we're trying to address and be mindful of?
Yep, we'll do.
Thanks.
Yep. And so another early action project that we're trying to get a handle on is the optimization of our supply from Sonoma, and just changing up how we think about this, so it's kind of easier for us to grab a hold of these monikers. If you might think of our approach in the past, you might say we've been sort of frugal in the sense of fiscally responsible. We were trying to hit it was a fiscally driven policy. We'd purchase the minimum amount of the 5,300. So we'd meet our contract requirements, but only if it was an extremely dry year and we could be certain that we wouldn't spill the water would we purchase more. And then, in 2020, thereabouts, we sort of switched to what we're kind of coining here, cautious, which is to say that this is really about we maximize the purchase of water. How much of this supplemental water can we bring in to preserve our water supply on the mountain? And clearly those two, the frugal and the cautious, both have consequences. And we're aiming for this sweet spot, what we're calling optimized. And I realize this is a very idealized discussion we're having right now. There will not be an absolute correct number for us to purchase from Sonoma, but we think that there's a way for us to analyze, 100+ years of hydrology data and our water demand data to understand if there is a number that's better than 5,300 acre feet for us to be targeting in terms of our purchases from Sonoma. And will that reduce our risks, both of purchasing too much water and not enough water over a long period of time? So that's sort of the idealized goal of this optimization of supplemental water.
On this one, so what do you think? What is the product of this? What will there be a narrative that describes our current, what at the time would be our current storage at different times of the year, to give some sort of guidance about how much of an investment we might make at different times of the year?
And under different conditions, sort of think of it as a set of rules.
Okay.
So that we could all maybe look at it and come close to the same answer. Whereas today it's very judgmental and sort of in a way, today we're just buying as much as we can. But under this optimized strategy, we would all have and operate under the same sort of set of rules. Now those rules, they're guidances. So there's still an element of judgment that's going to come into this.
Would you be able to go backward, run some results if we applied those rules in hindsight, or and see how they is? I imagine that's how the optimization will be developed.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back, maybe more than a couple of years now, we were looking at our own reservoir storage, and we were saying, well, if we managed, the drought of the 80s, when we looked at that 87 to 92 drought, and we hypothesized what would have happened had we purchased, 13,000 acre feet of water, how would that have changed our reservoir storage over that period of time? And we would never have gone into any mandatory conditions. So yeah, we can absolutely model those types of scenarios.
Do you have any early insight into what the algorithm is that you're going to look at in this optimization? Is it like storage / weather, time, date? I mean, what are the inputs?
Yeah, I'll ask Xavier to maybe elaborate.
I guess I would say the rules have to be simple. So one of the things we're looking at is a simple rule. Instead of saying what is the current system storage and then purchasing based on that. So, for example, the frugal, only if it's at emergency levels would you make a purchase. What about a very simple forecast? It has to be simple and that it could actually be implemented. So if it's one that has, perfect vision, well, what's the point? It has to be simple enough that staff could do it. So making a simplified projection, say of end of September storage, and then saying, well, if that doesn't meet our target, and that accounts for supply and demand, not just where they are today, but where they're trending. And that would, I think, be an improvement. The thing is tuning it. And the model, as President Schmidt suggested, would be able to take advantage of all this hydrology, as well as some of the thinking about future climate, and say, well, what if that comes true? Would that change the rules? And understand those trade-offs.
And do you think that would lead to a better understanding of would future capital investment, augmentation, storage, and input or increased supply, would any of those, would that be an addition to the calculus or a byproduct afterwards?
It would be an addition. I think the system that's in place now, complete with recent and contemplated or in progress improvements, as well as all the ones we're thinking about, consistent with the water supply strategy. The idea is, it allows you to trade off, how do they work singly or together and at different sizes. So, right, it's optimize what's there, but also be able to examine pretty critically specifics of proposed capital projects and how they work together.
Okay, so then quickly, I think you had an update July 25th at the Ops Committee on the Phoenix to Bontempi reservoir pumping, where the team is looking sort of condition assessment of the tunnel, and the pipeline, I think, is next. So next steps are for them to enter that tunnel and do a condition assessment on the pipeline. And I think they've talked to you about the route options that they're analyzing as well. This team is also adding some resources in the form of electrical engineering. I think this is Kennedy Jenks, I think, is being resourced to assist this team with mechanical and electrical engineering. And of course, a geotech consultant as well. The application for this has been put into PG&E because there'll be a new larger pump station potentially as a result of this project. Similarly, out at Sulahuli, the electrification of the pump station out there is going to improve our operational flexibility. But importantly, at this point, I think that the PG&E analysis is, I think you heard at the ops, is kind of focusing towards line power. Some of the other options that PG&E were looking at, solar and some of these other options are kind of, those are now dropping away. So they're sharpening their focus on line power at this point, and we expect, I think, to have that response within the next week or two. And here the team is bringing on a consultant for electrical engineering support. They're looking at, the discharge from Sulahuli pump station currently only goes to the top of the hill, and then it flows through open channel flow into Nicasio Reservoir, and there's some water losses there and a whole bunch of operational considerations in terms of permissions with the farms out there, and certain flooding of certain crossings, and cows don't like water, and it's a bit of an operational mess. So it would be nice and important for us to have that discharge piped all the way to Nicasio. So
real quickly on the sustainable solutions piece. It's kind of a disappointment that PG&E is turning away with that. Is that based purely on cost for them?
Well, they're going to provide us the report, but their thinking at this point is that it seems like sustainable solutions may not be cost effective for us at this point, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that too. It'd be great to see that calculus.
Yeah.
So let's look. I mean, we seem like an optimal landowner and climate for solar. We have a long-term perspective. So it would just be good to see the math.
Yeah, I'm sure Alicia will bring that back at a detailed update. So tonight we're just kind of hitting the highlights. And
cool.
At ops, we can dive into details. Okay, so it is looking, obviously not all of the schedule for all of these projects is within our control, and we're kind of at PG&E's mercy essentially here. So As soon as they finish their study, we're paying our fees, making sure we're getting in line so that we can move forward as quickly as they're able to. And then not forgetting, of course, water efficiency. This week, I think there's a comms and water efficiency committee where I think Adrian will be discussing the results of the survey, and that should prove to be a very interesting discussion. August 29th, we have a water efficiency workshop with our customers to engage with them and get their feedback directly, and also an opportunity for us to really sit down with them and explain to them our incentives and exactly what we're doing and what some of the costs are. So that's pretty well subscribed at the moment. I think we had it capped at 50. I don't know if we've hit 50 at this point, Adrian, but sorry.
You're stealing my thunder for
Well-
tomorrow, but we're at 38. Yeah.
We'll get the details tomorrow. The master plan is underway, and we're going to use hopefully some of the feedback that we hear from our customers, wrapping that up in the master plan. And we've been talking with you about expanding, the options for gray water, the ordinance there to provide customers with options so that we don't kind of end up with this ineffective ordinance that doesn't really save us any water. And we'll be back to you with some ideas on that to firm that up, and similarly sunsetting of a couple of incentives around toilets and washing machine programs. And then Carrie's latest sort of innovation, which is this non-residential incentive program, which we'll be back to you again with additional details. And I just have a note at the bottom about educational programs, because the conservation program is so much more than we can cover in one or two slides this evening in a quick update. But there's a ton of information available on our website. I encourage our customers to check it out there. Okay, as the water loss reduction program, so this is real losses through leaks, right? We have pipe breaks. There are throughout our system seeps and weeps and those sorts of things that occur every year. And then there's also a term that I'd say is apparent losses. And you can think of those in the difference between production meters and billing meters. And so you can see that the actions that we might be able to take on real losses are physical capital improvements, things that we can actually do to affect our system. An example might be there's an opportunity to reduce pressure out in the system that might change the amount of volume through a weep or a seep. And those, over a system with 900 miles of pipe, those can be fairly significant. So that's just one aspect of it. There's technology that can be brought to bear with respect to leaks, right? There's all kinds of acoustic sensors, there's satellite imaging, and we're going to take a look at all of those things as part of this process. On the apparent losses side, there's calibration of meters, there's more accurate meters, there's better meters, there's just different ways that we can improve those calculations.
At the Danish presentation at Sonoma Water, there was a Danish German company called Kempler or something like that has an acoustic listening device in each water meter. And I think it brings a very unique opportunity. It's a electronic meter, no moving parts. And it has this listening device. So you have them dispersed throughout the system, listening to both sides, the lateral and the main. So they talk back and they say something like, hey, I hear this or whatever. I think it's a pretty interesting option, especially with the no moving parts. I mean, it's some kind of a Doppler effect or something like that going through it. It has the same battery life as a regular AMI type meter, but I think it brings a whole different look at the usefulness of the meter.
Right. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, there are actually a bunch of these. I've looked at a few as well. And the main benefit is leak detection, because they can tell on which side and where it's coming from quickly on the spot. So they're definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, great. Lots of opportunities. Okay, so as we get into, those are some of our early actions, and I'm already tired. It's just it's a long list of things that we've got going on. It's really amazing. So in our longer term actions, I'm going to ask Xavier to speak to the conveyance and the storage slides.
So there's a slide on each because I think that the steps, although there may be some commonalities, they are unique. There's sort of a class of considerations you have for horizontal projects, which is mostly what conveyance is, or these more facility oriented projects, which is the storage. And I think one thing they have in common is they all take a little longer than we'd like. And so I think I'm glad that Paul set the stage by calling them longer term actions. I think the good news is that the Jacobs Strategic Water Supply Assessment provides an excellent foundation that we're building on top of. One of the things it did, of course, is identified a list of feasible alternatives. And those alternatives also are tied to a goal, which is need for water. So they quantified how much water, and these are potentially feasible alternatives in each of these classes, whether it's conveyance or storage. And they do have different sets of concerns, different expertise to develop them all. So I think it's appropriate to treat them in these two tracks. They also likely have strong independent utility, which is great news because they may have different timelines and different sets of trade-offs. So what each slide lists here, starting with conveyance, in short, the conveyance is to improve the movement of water between the Sonoma system and your own system. And there's several alternatives that have been identified as potentially feasible, but they differ a lot in terms of lots of things, including potentially cost, constructability, impacts, and also benefits. And that's an important part, which I think we touched on earlier, is would we be able to model the system with some of these hypothetical improvements in place and at different sizes? And that is one of the goals, because I think it's important to capture not only that a certain pipe might cost more money or take more time than another, but some of these might provide substantially more or less benefit to the district. So we want to understand all that. And now is the time to do that, because the CEQA NEPA process and the kind of the technical engineering, they really need to be done in concert so that the technical work can inform the CEQA work. The CEQA NEPA work also needs to inform the engineering and technical work. And of course, the stakeholders, including the general public and all of the organizations that really have a legitimate need to understand what's going on, what are these trade-offs. I think for that to be a really rich discussion, we need to have these two efforts, the technical effort as well as CEQA NEPA, done in concert. And that's the thinking here, is we build on the work that's been done with the strategic assessment, but we do need to get into the alternative specific nitty gritty. You know, what about where exactly would the pipe go in a street? What sort of impacts would that have? Once it was built, how well would it work for the district? How would it be used, and what benefits would that provide in terms of drought relief? So that's the next level of dive we have to do after the work that's been done. So all of the steps here, which as you can see, they're not all future steps. They're things we've been working on. They're all building on the work that's been done. And the idea is that these are the necessary steps to develop the point to, we have a project that we can bring back to you, and you can say, basically, after obviously a lot of discussion, which you would be involved with, there needs to eventually be a project that you can say yes to very specifically. Here we go. Yeah. Should we move on to storage?
Yeah, so in terms of conveyance, I would just add that we'll be seeing you on this Friday at the operations committee as we bring you our recommendation for a consulting team on that.
So if conveyance is about where would the pipe be, how big would it be, and so on, with storage, you have, for the most part, there are sites that have been identified either because you already have storage there, or there are some new sites that have been talked about maybe on and off for years. And I think the SWISA report does a good job of kind of running through an inventory of those. The next logical step, though, is to look at each site as an individual. And that means look at the geology, look at impacts on utilities and roads, look at, again, benefit to the water system, because not all 10,000 acre foot improvement projects are equal. operationally, and we'll be able to model that. So we're looking at, the costs, the impacts, the benefits, the timeline, and those impacts, they could be across a wide range of concerns, whether it's short-term construction impact or impact on, say, inundating a road and requiring it to be relocated. All those things are on the table. That's why this is the time to understand those, to support a sound decision. Having worked on many projects like this over the years, both conveyance and storage, one of the projects, just as an example, ended up being a tunnel under Walnut Creek. And for that, we looked at a bunch of different alignments. And I was the dam safety engineer at East Bay Mud. We had 30 dams, and many dams needed to be rehabilitated. So the sorts of trade-offs I'm talking about are ones that I've seen play out different ways and learn lessons along the way. I think one strong lesson here is the kind of the slow and sure wins the race approach, that it's really important to be methodical when we go through these alternatives. So these steps we're talking about taking are to make sure that when we say, all right, we have this universe of alternatives, we're going to screen some of them out. We need to be very careful and open, transparent about how that's working. Why are we screening them out? Why are we favoring these survivors for an additional level of scrutiny? And what should that scrutiny look like? I mentioned a few factors like geology. It's important to really drill down on that short list as well, because we don't want to advance a project and then announce after years of study that we found a fatal flaw. So that's why you see certain efforts that do involve time and money right now, but they're to head off getting to the point where you have to backtrack. And these projects take long enough without that.
Haven't most of these questions already been asked in the original work to decide where to put the dam, where to put the reservoir? I mean, they would have addressed basically all of those questions in terms of inundation, or, why did they choose the height of the dam they chose? For instance, someplace there must be a document that discusses that. It may not be adequate, but I sure think we should look at that real hard to see why things are the way they are. I mean, even something as simple as the spillway height, they don't just guess at these numbers. They're calced out to some backwater curve that says it's okay to do this because it'll cause this condition upstream. And I think that's really important. While I'm mentioning it, I have troubles with your first loop on the model. It seemed to me like pie in the sky, maybe a valid track, but you have no way of ground truthing it. And, you don't really have any future data. I mean, it doesn't exist. So you can't know what's coming. And maybe you can derive a lot from looking at the past, maybe, but I don't know that the database is that useful going forward. It might be. Can't hurt to look at it, but I don't know that you're going to gather that much information out of it. So just a thought.
Understood. And I think we'll understand that better as we go forward. And to the extent we can improve on either of those bookends, essentially the frugal versus the cautious. Even if we look at the modeling, I think an important conclusion of modeling might be that it doesn't tell you everything. And if we can understand that much, understand its limitations, we may still be able to improve on one of those bookend positions.
Yeah, but you get caught in the garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can truth your inputs. I mean, I understand it from a tummy rubby standpoint. I got it. But when you come to the reality of, how do you then make that choice? My PhD was a computer model. So, I mean, I've got a little background in this. It's tricky, what you choose and how you write that algorithm is not a simple task. Obviously, if it were simple, it already would have been done.
Agreed. I think that one of our challenges will be to make it as simple as we can, but knowing also, like all models, it'll be wrong. We hope it will be useful, though.
We'll see. Yeah, I love the idea that you're taking a crack at it, right? Always try to do better. More input, more data, new ways of looking at it. It can't hurt to try. The biggest area I think of opportunity in that is the timing, the date of our decision making. That to me feels a bit off, that could use a little more science behind it. I have a quick question about the storage. Are you taking into account other regional partnership storage opportunities or only in our own territory? In other words, Sonoma and anywhere else?
I think that as I understand the strategy, there's a list of other considerations on the table, and should they materialize, the district would certainly be able to take advantage of that, consistent with its strategy. We are keeping a relatively narrow focus here, which is that, you know, the SWSA identified a list of options. We certainly want the consultant team's best thinking on interesting variations of those alternatives. If we said, you know, add X acre feet, if they identify an important threshold, I think consistent with Director Russell's comment, there might be a reason why something's at a certain point. And that could actually drive economics. They might say, well, there's a sweet spot here. You can raise the dam a little bit. After that, you're getting into major modifications to the outlet works, for example. And those thresholds may exist.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I was asking is that it would be interesting to see if local storage augmentation here might, let's just say it may be way more expensive than we can help someone else do it, that we could pay for it up there. They would benefit from it. We could get access to it, and it may be way less expensive than some of these options. I think it should be a part of the thought process, but maybe that's a totally different project. I don't know. It seems related, right? Where are we going to put the water?
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. I think some of the contractors are looking at our storage, that right among the contractors in the region, we're unique in that we have storage. And to the extent there's opportunities to expand, they may be part of that effort in some way. And I
Not only do we have storage, Ben, we have the only storage.
Right.
I mean, you
Right.
got Mendocino, okay, they catch a little in that one.
But I
But-
do think the regional opportunities may flow that way as much as the other.
And I think I didn't fully answer Director Russell's initial question either about, given that we have 3 existing dam sites, don't we know a lot about the geology, geometry, you name it, hydrology? And we do know a lot, but take a legacy dam like say Peters Dam that was last studied intensively in the 80s. The knowledge of dams and dam standards for design have changed over that period of time. So if we go to modify a dam like that, we wouldn't be starting from scratch, but we would have to assume that it needs to now be examined under the lens of the latest in dam engineering.
Sure, but the hydrology hasn't changed.
At least not necessarily. You're right. Every now and then you get a new HMP or something like that.
Yeah, the dam side, I agree with. In fact, I've never heard anybody talk about how they arrived at the height of the raising of the dams. Not a single word. And everybody I know who would know that is dead. So I don't know. Oh, maybe Thiessen, Ron Thiessen. He might know. Dana might know. But nobody that's currently at the water district I'm aware of knows that. I don't know unless you do, Paul.
I don't.
Yeah, I've never even heard a discussion about it. You know, they say the raised Alpine, they raised Peters Dam. Okay, you know, why didn't they choose that height to begin with?
Do we have an archive?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what those file cabinets are. Well, maybe. You know, they may or may not have documented it. It's good to look. That's why I bring up looking at the dam reports, because that's exactly what you do, as you well know. You come into a Bear Valley and you're looking at 3 of them. And you look at, you know, what's the volume to height of the dam retained, you know, how many gallons do you get per foot of dam? All that stuff I guarantee you that's all been ground through. Now, you know, because you hear the people talking about Sulahuli. You know, it's a tricky, have you been there?
Yes.
Yeah. It feels like you're driving to Hawaii. I mean, it's so far out there. I was blown away the first time I went to that dam, how far it was from our water district. And we pay the price because we don't have the facilities to get the water into us, you know, kinda, not really. But I like I said, I've never seen logic for exactly how they got to where they got to. I'm sure Deet had it. I'm sure there was something, but like I say, not even in across having a drink has it ever come up in my presence. And I find that interesting, you know, like, especially something like Alpine. I mean, that's a real task to raise something like that. Be like raising Hoover Dam in relative terms. And it's very tricky. So like I say, I don't know. I suppose it speaks to the quality of their choice of the reservoir site, because it says, hey, you can raise the dam and achieve this additional storage without tremendous side effects. So, you know, I think, and like I say, you might start with Dana or with
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and see if we could find that information as part of our initial tasks on
I
this.
guarantee you, Paul, there's a report that says the sizing of Peters Dam or something like that, huh? And there's going to be another one about its increased height.
As you can imagine, there's a lot of information about Peters Dam
Yes.
to go through, but
I think needless to say, this is on a to-do for you. And we would look forward to hearing what you do find, because we're now all very interested to understand why previous raises were selected and
we
the
will-
trade-offs. Because it obviously, to Larry's point, is there's valuable information in there that could influence what we choose to do. And we're trying to be efficient with time. And on that, and I want to come to the point where I think the comment about going slow so that we go efficiently, so that we don't get to a fatal flaw and make a mistake. At the same time, we want to be moving expeditiously. And I think that there are probably a number of different factors that could be deal killers along the way that we ought to be identifying up front, and to make sure that we're investing time to look into those things quickly, so that we don't spend time analyzing an option that we could have figured out for a lot less was not feasible. So just a general comment. I want to come to the part where I continue to be concerned, which is what will happen with the State Water Resources Control Board with respect to our water rights with a storage project. I really would have hesitation at going forward with a scope of work and contract until we have a better sense of what limitations, if there are any, that would occur with the increase in storage. And I don't know how the preliminary conversations have gone, but I think that we really need to have a report out on those discussions and to understand whether that is an Achilles heel, whether that is something that, you know, would require opening up our water rights. And is that a fundamental problem that, you know, and what would that mean? And what kind of analysis would we need to do to understand what would be an outcome of a revisiting of our water rights, and how that would affect our actual yield from any sort of storage. So I think these are really important things that we need to get in front of the board sooner than later before we make big commitments on next steps.
Is that the number 4 bullet?
I'm looking down at preliminary discussion with State Water Board, and it's got a check next to it. So I'm not sure what came out of that. Maybe that was just, hi, we're looking at this, or maybe it was a more in-depth discussion, but I don't know what the.
We're gonna, I think, have something for you at the September 5th timeframe on water rights. Be the beginning of that discussion.
Okay. I just think that then it's going to start jamming the next things that I see in the process. So I don't know whether we can make sure that we, between now and then, really do tee up that conversation, so we're really ready to understand it. And I wouldn't be surprised that if out of this board we have some questions about it that might result in more further back and forth that needs to be addressed before taking other bigger actions.
So far, I think all indications are the parallel path in a number of ways is what, well, let me just back up. Staff is moving based on board direction as quick as we can on the water supply projects identified in the roadmap. And we do plan to talk about the conveyance and bringing on a consultant team for that at the ops committee. And shortly thereafter, a similar contract on storage. In terms of storage, I do think all indications are, given that we have a number of alternatives on which reservoirs, the size of raising, how much they potentially could be raised, that working in parallel is most likely the direction that staff's going to recommend.
Meaning what?
Meaning talking to the regulators as we're developing the technical understanding of feasibility of the different alternatives in front of us. We've tried to think about talking to the regulators first without that information, and we'll talk more about it, but that seems very problematic at this point, given there's so much we really don't know. And we're talking also about different watersheds. And so would we want to, for example, dive deep into the Lagunitas Creek watershed if the initial engineering assessment says, oh my gosh, you've raised that once, you know, we just, to raise it again is a huge project and point us to other reservoirs that are more feasible in terms of cost and practicality of doing it. So we will talk more. I do understand the perspective, but what we have thought about it, we've heard these comments, and I do think we are feeling, but we need to explain it in more detail than I'm doing now in terms of the reasoning of the recommendation to move in parallel on the dam studies with the discussion with the regulators and the environmental issues.
I guess I don't really think I agree with this because I think that I know that the details of what a surface storage raise would yield in terms of yield and other things, I think those obviously would vary, but we have some preliminary estimates. I think there's a litmus test I'm looking for is there, if we substantially increase our storage in some fashion, are we triggering the need to revisit our water rights?
Yes.
I'm not making any assumption. I believe you're right, but
it's not an issue of right. It's 9517 says that if you increase storage, you must release it. So you can raise the dam, but you have to release the water to the watershed. It's mechanical. I mean, that's what the current agreement says.
If I can, we are in the process of evaluating and looking closely at our water rights and all of those issues. And we don't want to do so without being thorough. There, typically there are two different ways to increase storage with respect to water rights: an amendment or a petition for change order. And we're evaluating which of those options are available. My understanding is preliminary discussions with the State Water Board staff is that it really depends on the details of the project. So it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, I think. We do have to know more details for them to really know which process, which road we would have to go down. But we are looking at all of these things, as Ben said, in tandem and evaluating all of that. And I think there will be more detail to come. I know there will be more detail to come because we're planning on bringing it, but in due course, in due time. And I think as part of the process, not as a standalone threshold issue necessarily, but I think they will inform each other. It is a bit of a, like I said, chicken and egg iterative process. Sometimes we'll need more information before the State Water Board staff can go, oh, okay, then this is what that looks like, right? So we can't tell them yet until we have some more technical analysis.
Do you know what triggered the lawsuit that set 9517 in
Yes.
process? What?
There was a CEQA challenge that was decided at the court level that was sent back. And then there was some additional analysis called for on just what the release should be in the flows. And then that went up to the water board and there was a determination based on that hearing.
Because my guess is you're going to hear the same words again. Because again, they're like us, I presume. Anybody who was involved is probably not there. But probably there are people still alive that they can reach out to find out why they made that decision. Recall that they originally wanted us to release twice as much water as we're releasing now. That was their original position.
And there have right. I did read all of the history and the decision-making process and understand how that arrived. And I think we're not taking exactly the same steps. We will be talking to the State Water Board, I think, more early in the process. But they're not able to give us definitive answers when we don't know yet
Of course.
what the project is. What are the alternatives that we're really
I think even when you know what the project is, they will not give you definitive answers
Well-
because this is too touchy. That'd be my guess.
I think more so about process they would, and not necessarily a yes, no on the ultimate decision. I'm just talking even about, which path we might choose to go down or be able to go down, depending on existing analysis of existing water rights and water usage, as well as, just what does the proposed project look like. And we have still a lot of things on the table to sort of work through and get more details on. So it is a hand-in-hand process.
So is our assumption though that what I would just want to know is just the bifurcation of whether there is almost 100% chances, Larry may be indicating, I don't want to speak for you, that we go forward with a surface storage project and we will be reopening our water rights. If there is some aspect of how we approach the design that does not trigger that would be helpful to know, that because that could be a very threshold decision. We talked about a year ago about having a water rights attorney come in and talk to the board, and we haven't done that. And I feel, and the reason why I keep bringing this up every time we ever have a conversation about this project, and I bring this up, is because I want to know more, and I kind of don't feel very comfortable about continuing forward, not getting a little bit more information about what are the thresholds for what would trigger a water right renewal, because I do believe that is a very fundamental issue that could have a very substantial change in the way we currently are, what we're currently required to release. So
yes, understood. We heard that. We are working on it. We have brought on new legal counsel who specializes in this area, and we're preparing information. Eric Robinson of Chronic.
Are you talking to Berliner at all?
Not on this particular issue.
And Maddow, Bob is also
Bob Maddow.
pretty strong.
We're working specifically with Eric Robinson, who is digging in with us on a
Which
lot
firm?
of the analysis on Chronic, a law firm in Sacramento.
Okay.
It's got a longer name, but the first name is Chronic.
Okay.
Sounds like you guys are on it. I'm supportive of bringing in a lawyer to help educate us more. I can't wait to hear more about your discussions about what our opportunities are here. So needless to say, we're all super interested.
While we've been talking, I've been thinking, and my judgment, intuition tells me that probably the height of the dams, the raising, was the maximizing of the water hydrology. In other words, they looked, the problem with Sulahuli is we have a big reservoir with no input. That's the problem with Sulahuli. And it doesn't do you much good to raise the dam if you can't get the water in. So what my judgment tells me is that both Alpine and Peters were raised to whatever they assumed judgment calculated to be the maximum hydrology. In other words, they could have done it the first time. And that the other part of it could very well be cost. They could have said, this is the max we're going to spend doing that, like 10 million or 20 million or whatever it is. And they just took it to that number and said, that's it. Because especially with Seeger and with Deet, it's how they thought. And Thyssen for that matter. They would be easily bound by those kind of thinking from my experience with them. You were, did you know Seeger?
Not Seeger, no.
You didn't know Seeger. Yeah, well, I knew Seeger for 25 years. So, Seeger was this individual, let's put it that way, had his own style of running this place. and not the biggest thinker. But thought a lot about money. And they were very tight in the way they approach things. So I'm guessing that's what's going to treat, they may not ever say that. Now, like I say, Dana may know, he may have had this discussion, or at least he's one that comes to mind who could have asked that kind of question and said, what does this mean? You know, why are we doing this? But I've never seen it anywhere else.
We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on. So we do have a sort of a third long-term action. This is the Petaluma River brackish desalination. And, you know, our partner Petaluma in this case is very interested. And as you know, they kind of accelerated the work and took on under their own water resiliency planning effort, this look at groundwater. And I'm hoping to have a report to you on that finding in sort of September timeframe, maybe at Ops in September. We can come to you with that. Some very interesting information there.
Who did the work?
So it was a combination of Kennedy and a geotech sub that they pulled together.
It surprised me they didn't use Ludorf because that's who they had always used before.
Right. But anyway, some interesting developments there on this. And then so a note here, as we talk about all of these projects, as you may recall, Director Russell certainly was on the board at the time, right? February 1 of 2022. We've just come out of this terrible drought. The reservoirs are now full, and we've got this emergency intertie project on our hands. And it was categorically exempt under the environmental regulations. Not meaning that we didn't have to do any environmental work. There was still a lot of environmental work that needed to be done. But in February, the board, given the water supply conditions, pivoted from an emergency approach to the compliance to authorizing Environmental Science Associates, ESA, to conduct a sort of a full EIR, sort of a normal process on the environmental review for the intertie. At the same time, kind of acknowledging that we're embarking on the strategic water supply assessment at the same time, recognizing that the intertie may not come out as the preferred or prioritized project. And indeed, that's what's occurred. The intertie is not one of the projects that's been prioritized as part of the roadmap. And so staff have retasked ESA to support the roadmap priority projects. So they'll be helping us with Phoenix, Sulahuly, all of the projects that we've talked about today on the roadmap. And they've provided that initial task under the same dollar value as they had for the intertie, just recognizing that, of course, we're undertaking significantly more work under the roadmap. So we'll be back to you at some point, we imagine, with changes to their agreement to help continue and further that work.
Where do they stand on what they've already done?
My understanding is there's been very little done, maybe on the order of 30-40 grand that was done because
I see, very little.
Yeah, very little. Because the strategic water supply assessment took such a broad view. We didn't want to kind of go down the road and spend $500,000 and then have to do a U-turn, sort of Xavier's comments earlier about, backtracking and so on.
Although a lot of the pieces are common to all of the EIRs.
Yes. Yeah.
Not site specific necessarily, like the community
Right.
effects and air quality and stuff
Right.
like that.
And
They could be conceptually addressed, I think.
And of course, now, right, with WRDA funding, we're looking at NEPA as well. So speaking of funding, we do have sort of two, and this slide just changed our funding slide a little bit. We've got a set of approved funding, right? We've got WRDA that's really targeted for us, and we're trying to get our paws and fingerprints on that money as quickly as we can, and then explain how we're going to spend the rest of it, so that it's really dedicated to our water supply projects. We do have a $2 million grant from DWR's Urban and Multi-Benefit Program, and that's eligible to support all of our SWUSA projects. And of course, we have applications in, as you can see on the right there, and we're going to continue to look for further grant opportunities as they come up.
Yeah, although the swiftest way is the one through WERDA where Jared Huffman put it in there and earmarked it for us, and it stayed, it got approved.
Yep.
So clearly that's the most efficient way to do this. You know, you don't have to be qualified. You just have to have the right push.
And so this is a summary funding table. And again, it hasn't changed for quite some time, but as we start to resource our projects all the way from Phoenix up to, storage and conveyance, we're going to start to get an idea of what those teams are thinking in terms of their expenditure rates, and we'll be adjusting our table in the coming weeks here. In terms of our procurement schedule, you can see the top red line. We're sort of middle of August, and we'll be selecting a conveyance consultant, right? At Ops, we'll be bringing our recommendations for that, and hopefully on September 5th, that can go on consent. So we'll be able to
How
start.
many submittals?
On conveyance, we had 2.
Jacob submit?
Jacobs did not submit. And so we're expecting to have the consulting teams on board for these 3 major long-term projects pretty much by middle of September is the goal, notwithstanding President Schmidt's earlier comments.
What?
President Schmidt's comments about wanting to understand more on water rights. In the bigger picture, in terms of what we're looking at, you can see here, we're bringing on our procurement, our conveyance consultant by sort of middle of September, and our conveyance technical analysis runs through about May of next year, when we'll have a well-defined project. And similarly, storage, we'll have the consultant hopefully on board in September of this year, and that's a slightly longer term analysis that they'll need to go through for that.
And by conveyance, you're talking about a new pipeline from the Russian River,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah. And then you see the timeline below for desal. We're hoping to have a feasibility study done sometime by the end of June. And just on that note, Kennedy Jenks are embedded with Petaluma, and they've done a fair amount of the initial work already. It does seem like maybe it would speed our process up, and I have a hard time seeing other consulting firms wanting to try to compete, given that Kennedy seemed to be fairly well embedded in the Petaluma project. So we may be coming to you with a recommendation there at some point. Our next steps then are we're going to continue to move on our early actions, and we're going to get started on conveyance hopefully very shortly here, and work on the alternate analysis. We're, like I mentioned, on Petaluma Brackish, we'll be hopefully at the ops in September, we'll have a nice report to explain progress and findings that we have to date on that project. And we're going to continue to track grant and road, funding for the roadmap projects, and we'll be back to you frequently. Hope we can keep it interesting. That's it for tonight.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other director comments?
I've got just one, Paul, if you could just for a second. And I just want to say thank you for the report. Welcome back. And very much looking forward to Friday in terms of locking in on a consultant to help us with the conveyance piece. And even if the sticker shock is higher than what it is we expected, we're going to see later on tonight that waiting any longer is not going to help that problem. So looking forward to that. One of the things that I don't see on here, and I know you have a full plate, and I know the regulations aren't out yet, but the recycled water piece. And I don't want that to fade off the map because it was part of the Jacob study. And I don't think we need as much attention paid to it as the items we have on there, especially because those are already taking up quite a bit of bandwidth. But if sometime towards the end of the year, early part of next year, if we could get an understanding of what the new regulations are throughout the state, so we have an idea of what that cost and what our capabilities for that type of water would be appreciated.
The draft regs are out. They hit the street about a month ago.
Okay.
So I talked to Javonicus about it. They're talking about 10 to the 20th removals. Now think about that, where something like a water filtration plant is maybe 6 logs of removal. This is 20 logs of removal. That is a lot. So, it's, I don't know again, my judgment tells me that it's beyond what a normal facility could do without very special conditions. San Diego, the original project I proposed, which I think made a lot of sense to them, then they've now shortcut that to a much smaller reservoir that has a tiny residence time. The Orange County folks have, and I believe correctly, will stay on the track they're on, which is to recharge the groundwater. But I'm not sure anybody else is going to be able to do it because, oh, well, then they're Las Vegas. I was in Vegas last week and I was thinking about them. They're sort of just doing it. You know, they have Las Vegas Wash. They treat the wastewater from the city of Las Vegas and they put it back in Lake Mead. And then they draw out of Lake Mead and they just do it. So I don't know that it's ever been considered to be, it's indirect, not direct. But it's interesting. I don't remember. Do you remember what the length is? It's like 1,000 pages or something. It's a big doc.
Regs. I mean, I get to cheat and look at summaries. But we've done obviously a report on DPR in collaboration with CMSA. It was fairly recently updated. And the regs at that time would have been draft, but they probably haven't changed a great deal. It is a tremendously technology intensive process. But we can certainly look at bringing an update sometime in the future.
What we're bucking against is the health department was trained appropriately, in my opinion, by Henry Ungerth, that you use the highest quality water for the highest quality need. And that's the basis they're operating from. In other words, you don't recycle wastewater unless there is no option. So there's a few places like the Van Wook in South Africa and even San Antonio is doing some pretty aggressive recycling. But most places are going to stick to fresh water. And I get very little feedback from my constituents about this, but I did get feedback on this one, which was, you're not going to put it in my shower, right? And, you know, that's somebody who knows me very well and respects my opinion. And they're basically just knee jerking back from the concept. It's an interesting issue of where it's going.
Matt, I'm supportive of bringing this to more attention. And if that's towards the end of the year or beginning of next year, I'd love to have a deeper understanding of the opportunities, and there may be other funding sources that we're not aware of that could help make that happen. So
we'll take
I'm going to second that.
Yep.
I think we just need to have a more broken down discussion. I think, Larry, you understand it in nuances that we don't, the rest of us don't. And it is something that there's a lot of interest in. So it'd be good to, when the time is right.
I
come
think
back.
it's doable now. I mean, in the next few months. I don't think we need to wait for the final regs. When I saw the draft, it turned me off. I just said, oh, this isn't even worth commenting on, because they're obviously going in a path that's not conducive to DPR.
Okay.
We'll take a look at
Yeah.
the calendar spot.
I'm mindful that we are getting a little, this was a really important item and worth every minute of it, but provide an opportunity for the public to provide comment.
Yes, we have several. Mr. Phil Sauter, Roger Roberts, and then Ed Jamison, please.
Good evening, and thank you for the presentation. I'm enjoying watching the transition from passive observers to what our customers are doing to active managers of what our customers are doing in terms of conservation. And it leaves me with a question: can we create a set of goals for conservation, take actions, measure results, revise actions, measure results, revise action, measure results until we meet our goals? I can tell you that a process like that does not lead to spending $1.7 million year after year after year on conservation. So I know we're not there yet. To kind of get to a set of goals, I spent some time with the State Water Resources Board report on per capita usage by water district. And it's a website that gives about 7 years worth of monthly data for hundreds of water districts. I picked out 3 that I thought were kind of illustrative. I picked out Santa Cruz, Sonoma, and Marin. What's interesting to watch as we look at their usage over those years is Santa Cruz very steadily uses 40 gallons per capita per day in the winter, and they go up to 60 gallons per capita per day in the summer. Sonoma started out at 50 gallons per day in the winter, and reliably they're using 50 gallons per day per winter today over 7 years. Their summer use has gone from about 90 gallons per day per capita. They've peaked at about 110, and lately they're getting back down to about 80. Marin, we started out at 60 gallons per capita per day in the winter, and we're going down to about 50 gallons per capita per day currently, which ties in with the flume results we saw. Our summer use, we started out at 120 gallons per day, and we did that for about 5 years. And the last couple of years, we got down to about 90, and we're staying right at about 90 gallons per day in the summer. So these were kind of interesting numbers. It helped me to put together goals for a 5-year residential water efficiency program, and I pulled these out of here, but they seem reasonable to me. 1 is to protect water quality. 2 is to preserve or improve enjoyment of residential landscape. 3 would be to maintain indoor use of less than 50 gallons per capita per day. Encourage summer water use of less than 75 gallons per capita per day, and upgrade existing infrastructure to reduce water loss by 50%. I've got some benefits of that. I'm running out of time, but it would take our average residential water use down to 62.5 gallons per capita today per day, 12.5 million gallons a day, or 14,000 acre feet a year. That means we could have a 3-year water supply instead of 2 years. That would eliminate the need for expensive new sources of water and leave us with improved infrastructure, increased resiliency, and a sustainable long-term water supply, less need for future rate increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Would you be
Suh.
kind enough, Phil, to send me an email on that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good, Mr. Roberts, and then Mr. Jameson.
Good evening. I have a question which is just a matter of curiosity. Have we ever measured evaporation and evaporative loss in our reservoirs, and how does that relate to temperature averages over the years? And is that a significant issue for us in terms of our planning going forward relative to water supply? If you haven't done that, I think it's something that would be worthwhile doing. And if you have already done that, it would be interesting to know what those impacts are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ed Jameson, Maria G, then 1402, please. Mr. Jameson.
Yes, thanks. This was a typically excellent presentation by district staff tonight, with outstanding board discussion and with directors Russell and Schmidt providing particularly insightful input based on their experience. This is a well done to all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Miss Maria G, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In regard to the history of the dam, specifically the Sulahula, a smaller dam was present upstream of the existing location. This smaller dam was constructed by an investor with the goal of developing waterfront subdivision real estate. My understanding is that this existing smaller dam opened the door for expansion conservation or conversations by MMWD. As for the current top of dam level, it was told to us over the years that it was the result of negotiations and hard-fought arguments by the adjoining landowners to protect their family homes, access, infrastructure, and businesses, together with close proximity to the Quicksilver mines. Now, decades later, my family, as well as our adjoining neighbors, find ourselves in the same situation as your models and potential dam increase inundate nearly all of our homes, infrastructure, access, and businesses, as well as our fertile land. My question is, when will us landowners be contacted on a more personal level as to what minor or major impacts be imposed on our lands. Currently, we are all in the dark as to our future, holding on to simple, vague statements and blurry projections presented in these meetings. We appreciate your efforts, but the unknowns are still exponential. Thank you.
Thank you. 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. Three principles should guide the board. Number one, increased local storage is essential. Number two, the water board's whimsical limits are an obstacle to be overcome and will be overcome. And number three, these limits are as much a political problem as a legal problem. We need to begin to open a conversation with our legislators about legislative relief from these whimsical limits. This is a very good time to do it because Newsom has ordered the water board to relax various requirements in order to accommodate increased water storage. And two very important considerations have changed since 1995. One is climate change, and the other is the state's demands for extreme increased housing development. So in that context, we should go forward, assuming that it is essential to push aside the water board's whimsy. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Mimi Willard and then Larry Minikes, please.
Yes, good evening. A comment on two pieces of this. Number one, with regard to raising dam heights, I think it is really premature to delete any of your lead plausible options for water supply. And so I think it is important to be making the investigation into negotiations that would allow for a shared gain, which is to say you get a portion of the increased water supply and the rivers and streams get also a portion to be controlled, released according to whatever negotiation is arrived at. I think that this might be an instance in which spending a little money on a consultant to help explore some of these possibilities might be a prudent approach. Secondly, with regard to electrification, I think that I would encourage you not to take PG&E's word for the fact that it is the most financially desirable for you to go ahead and use line power. I agree with the members of the board who have expressed an interest in finding out more about ways to have a more green approach to getting electric power. And this would be a place again where it might be good to just go out and get a couple of solar bids and engage a consultant if necessary to make sure that you've looked at all your options there.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Minikes, please.
Yes, good evening again. Our comments reflect Mr. Jamison's and thanking Paul for another excellent presentation and really excellent questions from the board and comments from the board. It's important for the public to understand that this process continues to create questions that must be answered. And there's been criticism in the past that we keep studying and that there's no action. But as is evidenced tonight, process is extremely critical because we're looking at very complex, very expensive, long-term decisions, and doing this right is going to pay off multiple times in the long term. Thank you.
There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. That was definitely a very informative item. Okay, moving on to item number 7, a resolution awarding a contract number 2006 spillway condition assessment phase 2 project in the amount of $588,956 to Pressure Grout Company. It's an approval item.
Good evening, directors. I have Alex Anaya here, the engineering manager for design, to present this item.
Hi, good evening, directors. I'm Alex Anaya, Engineering Manager Design. I'll be presenting this item tonight. I'll give a quick little brief kind of history about this. So as a result of the 2017 Orville Dam spillway failure, the Division of Safety of Dams required that all dams having a concrete spillway similar to that of Orville be inspected. So following that notice, the district did hire a consultant, AECom, to conduct a condition assessment on all our dams and prepare an assessment for Peters Dam, Seeger Dam, and Sulahuli. So the first phase of this condition assessment involved cleaning the dam and doing crack sealing, which is minor, and that was completed back in October of 21. So currently, just on June 20th, we advertised the second phase of this condition assessment, which is a little bit more in depth and involves doing a GPR survey, which is used to locate voids underneath the spillway, followed by some coring in those areas that have identified. It's basically like a 4-inch diameter core, and we stick a camera underneath there to look at the bottom side of the spillway and see if there's any other issues, along with cleaning of the subdrainages and the spillways. So during the course of the bidding process, there was not much contractor interest in the project. So we extended the bid due date to July 13th, and then we contacted 6 additional contractors and informed them of our project. Following that, we did extend our bid opening to July 20th, and then had the public bid opening, and we received no bids. So under the California Public Contract Code section 22038C, and I'm paraphrasing, if no bids are received, then the district may negotiate and award a contract, just kind of foregoing the Public Contract Code section. So staff did reach out to the pressure grout company and requested them to provide us a formal proposal for this work. And they did provide us a proposal in the amount of $588,956. Staff reviewed the proposal and found it to be in line with the work that's necessary to complete this work. So staff is recommending that the board approve this resolution to award contract 2006 to the pressure grout company in the amount of $588,956 and authorizing the general manager to execute any necessary amendments not exceeding $100,000. And I will.
Did we ask them why they didn't bid in the original round?
I think it's just right now in the middle of the summer, everyone's got a lot of work going on, and there was really no interest in this work. And we reached out to 6 different contractors that were not on our plan holders list, and they were like, "Oh, okay, we'll look into it." And it was very minimal interest.
Is their submission in line with the parameters for the bid that you sent out to everyone else? Is it different in any way?
Exactly the same.
And is the dollars in line with what you're expecting?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Like exactly, or?
Well, not exactly. It's a little bit higher, but it's still within the range of plus or minus this X percentage for this kind of work.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's frequent that the district is the low bidder. Not as a complaint, it's just a fact of life.
Correct.
I'll point out though that. I will point out though that the approved CIP budget was for 1.2 million for the entire project. That includes the contractor's work, the AECom's work, the labor and staff from district time. So we're still within the approved budget for the CIP project.
It's helpful. Thank you.
How are our GPR guys doing? They got it?
They're doing well. They've been practicing with the device and
Good.
getting more familiar and comfortable with it. We did send a couple of folks over to Nevada for training, and they received additional training on the device.
I presume that Shasta didn't do this, Orville didn't do any of this prior to the problem.
I would assume so. Yes, they didn't know that there was a large void underneath the spillway. And I should also note that I have familiarity with pressure grout. We did use them in San Jose. We had a major void under Highway 87 from a 60-inch pipeline leak, and they were able to pressure grout that void for us and avoid traffic outages to the airport and downtown San Jose.
Yeah, they're good outfit.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are there other board comments? No. Okay. Are there any public a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, are there any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, could we get a roll call vote?
Yes. Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson.
Aye.
Director Smith
Aye.
and President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us along to item number 8, a resolution adding $750,000 of additional contingency for the Pine Mountain Tunnel tank phase 1.
Okay, thank you, directors. We have a presentation for this item. And Terry, we're still starting it here, right? Yes. Okay, you got it.
Hi, Mark.
Got it.
Hi.
Sorry, Crystal Yasmin again, and Mark Kesray, our engineering manager for construction, and we'll give a presentation.
No. Okay, great. Good evening, members of the board, President Schmidt, Mark Casray, Engineer Manager for Construction, here to present item 8, which is a request to approve $750,000 in additional contingency for the Pine Mountain Tank Phase 1 project, which is the rough grading and soil nail retaining wall. So the presentation outline is essentially a quick status update on the project. We'll go over 3 unforeseeable contract change orders that presented themselves early on in the project. We'll present a recommendation to the board and then discuss quick next steps. So just a quick recap on what phase 1 is. It's a major rough grading project in anticipation of phase 2, which is the installation of the 2 tanks. Approximately 5,000 cubic yards of excavated material is planned for offhaul to a landfill. And then, of course, the installation of a soil nail wall and various civil improvements. So as of August 1st, we have mobilized onto the project site. We've installed temporary construction facilities and we're getting the project going. We've completed clearing and grubbing. We've begun stockpiling soil for offhaul, and that's shown in this photo here. And we've completed the installation of a 200-foot guardrail along Sky Oaks just above the tank site. So just to touch on a couple of milestones recently, as of last year, the board awarded the project on May 24th. On July 21st, the project was placed on hold as the district anticipated a FEMA hazard mitigation grant award. And shortly thereafter, upon learning that the grant would not be awarded to the district, we reinitiated the project for construction. However, there was a prohibition to construction due to the nesting season of the northern spotted owl, which is from February 1st to July 31st. Thank you. Okay, and so because of that 1-year delay, the contractor was due additional funding for delay escalation. Costs increased for their materials, for their labor, equipment, and various other costs. We did look at those costs in detail. We compared against the California state published rates and prevailing wages and equipment rental rates published by Caltrans. And we found them within expectation very closely. And this is a breakdown of those cost increases. So on the left, you can see the contract items. And then the original bids in 2022, and then column 3, the 2023 escalation and the delta on the left. Essentially, the total amount comes to about $1 million increase, which represents 19% on the contract.
A little higher than inflation.
Yeah, a little bit higher than inflation, yes. But we saw actual costs and supplier materials from their quotes go up by 35%. Concrete went up 25% during this time, and we've seen labor at around between 5 and 10%. So the conglomeration of a number of things, including engineering and management on the contractor side, because of the extra time they spent on the project, averaged out to about 19%. So moving on to change order 2 now.
Expensive delay.
Certainly. And yeah, and it's unfortunately, you know, kind of the cost of doing business and
well, and the unknowns. I mean, how can you know, until you find out you don't get it?
Exactly. And there was a lots of consideration as to the reward and the benefit from receiving such a grant. So it was,
Right. Yeah, that grant was a 90% grant award, possible grant award. I mean, $25 million ask was the ask. So
What I recall is we were pretty optimistic.
we were, yes.
Exactly. So moving on to change order 2. So you'll recall the previous board meeting, we notified the board of some issues on Bolinas Road. The 2023 rainfall events had resulted in a number of landslides. This road is also the primary off-haul route for our soils, about 5,000 yards of soils. The county has implemented traffic control, one-lane traffic control, and has begun an emergency retaining wall project. And so the district and county alike recognized concerns about off-hauling this material down Bolinas. And we presented some considerations that we'd made over alternatives for this managing of this soil. And so we looked at the options shown here, and we found that the most feasible alternative was to off-haul the topsoil through an alternative route, which we identified as the Shaver Grade Fire Road out through the town of Ross. And this slide just shows what that looks like. Essentially a 3-mile detour through the fire road and out through the town of Ross. And there will be traffic control measures at 5 corners that will allow through access on those adjacent trails, as well as flagging control at Natalie Coffin Green and at Glenwood and Lagunitas Road in Ross. And this shows.
I'm sorry, here you go.
Sure.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
You wanna go?
No, this one. He wants to see the trail closers.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Next slide. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. And so this shows the trail closures. Essentially what's shown here are limited access trails in the dotted lines. Our main haul route through is shown in red along Concrete Pipe Road, Shaver Grade. And we have signage identified at these limited access points that say closure ahead, and then a hard closure will be implemented at the intersection of the hauling route. So there'll be a physical barrier as well as a sign that says no access Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 a.m. And that's shown on the map in the yellow dots with the red X. It is very important that folks heed all traffic control signage and closures as we implement this work. And it's essentially kind of a 2-phased approach here. There's going to be about 2 weeks of preparation of the roadway for the hauling equipment, mostly smoothing the road and preparing it for driving vehicles down it, and then about a 4-week off-haul operation.
So is that a total of basically 6 to 7 weeks continuously?
I would estimate 6 to 8 weeks continuous, yes. And when we touch on the schedule shortly towards the end of the presentation there. So this is what folks will be seeing for a little while along Shaver Grade. We just wanted to highlight, what we're talking about here and emphasize how important it is to recognize the importance of the traffic control and respect that. And during this hauling operation, we will have heightened ranger presence, and a failure to heed the traffic controls may result in fines and ticketing. And so the effort to look at this new haul route costs an estimate of about $400,000, broken down evenly between preparation of the haul route and then the additional trucking, staff time, and overtime associated with utilizing smaller trucks to haul the same amount of soil in the same amount of time. Okay, so moving on to change order number 3. This is
Smaller trucks because the road's not as good.
road is not as good and also very tight, switchback corners and things of that nature. Yep. And so change order number 3 was risen after time of bid. Essentially, the material slated for off-haul was due to the soil-borne contamination known as Phytophthora. And it was originally slated during time of bid for the Redwood landfill. The contractor was required to perform soils analysis to determine what types of metals and various other contaminants may occur in order to dispose of it at a landfill. And they found naturally occurring arsenic concentrations between 4.5 and 8.5 milligrams per kilogram of soil. And unfortunately, although well within normal background levels in the state of California, it does exceed the low levels that are limited at the Redwood landfill. As a result, the contractor is required to haul further to Fairfield to discharge, and that comes at a cost of about $130,000. Okay, and just a quick summary of the change orders.
Makes sense to dump it and put it in bigger trucks once you get it down the road?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Just because the operation would almost double and you would have to have the labor power to bring that equipment in. We're estimating about 30 trucks per day moving. So there'll be, in order to transfer it, and you don't see that much improvement on the total volume. You might be able to go from 16 yards to maybe 18, 20 yards. You're not going to see that much of an increase in the production.
And let me just point out we've been working with the contractor. When he says 30 trucks a day, we're now talking about 2 batches. So the same 15 trucks twice. So they'll go once and they'll drive back, refill, go again. So the public will only see 15 trucks at a given time period passing by. Yeah.
And how do they get to Fairfield?
They're going to go Sir Francis Drake to Highway 101, and I believe I want to say 37 to Highway 80.
So that could be pretty slow.
It is possible, and
I wonder if they can really get 2.
So
it's a long ways to Fairfield.
It is. It's, about 30 minutes to go down just this trail. And that is of utmost consideration, because what they don't want is this second batch of trucks to be stopped at the landfill because it's closed.
Right.
So there's that dynamic at play as well. But we're gonna see what plays out in the next few days when we begin the operation, and it'll be fine tuned.
Are they going to load overnight? So the trucks will be full in the morning, or are they going to load in the morning?
They will be loading in the morning. They have stockpiled the soil, and the loading operation takes about 2 to 3 minutes per truck. So really, they're going to have the trucks lined up, loaded, and then the idea is to send them all down. Now, that may change, of course, when we begin the operation and see what might constrain us, but that's the idea. So the loading of the trucks, very, very quick. It's the kind of the grading work and stockpiling that they want to get ahead of.
Yeah, the problem what I'm getting at though is that that's true, but it adds up.
It's true. It adds up, but with 14, 15 trucks, it's actually a pretty short period of time to load all those and send them out. And we're working with the town of Ross, and they are not permitted to enter the town of Ross with the hauling trucks until 9 o'clock. So they actually have some time to load anyways, beginning at 8.
So you think they can get there before noon?
Possibly, yeah. And
they got hit before noon, or they're not going to make it back.
It's certainly
right. Yeah, they're hoping to hit the paved roads by 9 a.m.
Right. Great. And so, yeah, this is a summary, and these 3 change orders that kind of presented themselves early on in the project amount to about $1.5 million. And looking at that in the overall project perspective, we previously approved a contingency, or the board previously approved a contingency of 1.1 million. And so after the 1.5 in change orders results in a deficit of about 400,000. So we're requesting the board to approve 750,000 to allow for a remaining contingency of approximately 350 for unforeseen change orders that occur thereafter. And then looking at it from an overall project budget perspective, it's important to note that we approved, or the board approved, an $8.5 million capital budget for this project. And so after the potential $750,000 additional contingency, we still remain within that original budget, which basically means we don't need to appropriate funds at this time from other sources in our program.
Leaves us about $16,000.
Okay, and so we recommend to the board to approve $750,000 in additional contingency for the Pine Mountain Tank Phase 1 rough grading project. And briefly, I'll touch on the next steps. So we are working closely with the town of Ross, and we're planning to complete our outreach this week. We're slating August 21st, so this Monday, to begin our operation on the watershed with the closures, and that should commence over 2 weeks, and then beginning the hauling operation on September 5th.
I also just wanted to briefly add that staff, we are scheduled to give a brief update on this project to the Ross City Council next week. So we'll do that.
All right, board comments.
I'll start off unless Larry wants to. Very much appreciate the look to make sure that we're not spreading anything we shouldn't be spreading around there. I know the impact's a little bit greater I think last time we talked about 4 weeks, and then with the additional planning now, it's still within normal limits. But if it's going to go longer, it'd be great to know that sooner than later, especially if we find an issue for that. But it's good to get this project going for 2 reasons. One, you see the escalation in cost, but two, we started this meeting talking about Lahaina and their fire supply for water. This is a pivotal piece for contingency water supply for wildfire in the Ross Valley area. It's going to greatly increase our ability to deliver water and power outage. So this is the kind of steps I think that make a lot of sense. I'm very excited to see this get going. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ted?
I agree, Matt. Very supportive of this project. I'm glad the previous board approved it. I'm supportive of your additional expenditure request, and I'm very impressed by the speed with which you're moving right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, you should go up and take a look if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, we'd love to have you out there.
I only have one question. How are the bats taking it?
Well, we surveyed the bats prior to construction, found no presence, and we've since.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and we've
They
since.
moved out?
That's what the survey indicated, the biological survey we performed right before we were allowed to remove the trees. So, yeah, it's how they're taking it. I can't answer that, but I hope that if they,
Maybe they knew we were coming.
yeah, we did a lot of outreach for this project. So,
Well,
They must have heard you.
the outreach is a really important piece to this. The community of Ross is going to be bearing a brunt of the closure of that recreational access, which is really important. It's very heavily used. I know we're all aware of that, but to the extent that we're able to just, communicate, explain why, and that this was really the best alternative. And, we appreciate their patience because it is unavoidable. And for the reasons that we've just talked about in terms of fire safety, it's just, this is a project we must move forward on. So,
But it's nice to have one where the benefit goes to the people who are being inconvenienced. So that's a little unusual, that there's a one-on-one direct relationship.
good point. Okay. Let's see. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second.
Okay. Is there any public comment?
Yes, there are two, Roger Roberts and then Mr. Larry Minikes.
Just a question. I noticed a lot of dry grass along the side of the road where the trucks are going to be moving. And I wonder if there's going to be fire control during the process in the event that a spark, for whatever reason, should start a fire in the grasses where the trucks are moving the soil.
Can we speak to that?
be happy to. Yeah, we take that very close into consideration. We've got a water tower that's being fed from a raw water hydrant at Bontempi Road. We've got a water connection along Concrete Pipe Road where we're going to be loading trucks. We have implemented a hot work plan that requires radio communication. The contractor is required to look for red flags warnings the night before. No work is allowed to be performed during red flag warnings. Additionally, we have a 2,000-gallon water truck full-time on the project. And we have fire extinguishers and a number of other operational items.
Yeah, and I would add that preparation of the haul route, we are going to be doing additional vegetation management along the roadside to clear some of that high brush that was seen in that one photo. Yeah.
Controlled burn. Huh?
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Larry Minikes, please.
Yes, I want to give staff and the board a virtual high five on this project. I mean, how many years we've been talking about this, I can't even remember now, but it almost feels like a stepchild's finally going off on their own, and we're very happy about it. Two things. One, I would suggest not just information, such and such will be closed on such and such dates, but a storyboard placed at the Ross post office would probably be the best location for something like that, because you're going to get all the residents there. And the other is to go to your stakeholders such as MCBC as soon as possible and partner with them to get the word out on what's going to be happening up there. And I think that will ease the public process quite a bit. And thank you Good evening.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. With that, can we get a roll call vote, please, Terry?
Yes. Director Larry Russell,
Aye.
Director Matt Sampson,
Aye.
Director Jed Smith,
Aye.
and President Monty Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
that
you.
moves us along to agenda item number 9, a resolution to approve cost of living adjustment for unrepresented district employees.
Your mic. Your mic. Just press the button. There you go. Perfect. That's it. Don't touch it. Don't, you're good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good evening, board. Vicky Garay with the Human Resources Department, and I'm here to present this item. Staff is recommending that the board approve a cost of living adjustment for unrepresented district employees in the amount of 5.4% for fiscal year 24. And that would be effective the first full pay period following July 1. The district has a workforce of 240 employees. 40 of those employees are unrepresented. That's about 17% of the workforce. And they are not participating in the negotiation process. And this group includes some management employees and some non-management employees. The terms and conditions for the unrepresented group are outlined in a board resolution, which is approved by the board. And the current resolution governing the terms and conditions for this employment has historically allowed for a COLA on July 1 each year. So in order to provide the COLA without further delay, staff is requesting that the board approve an amendment to the unrepresented resolution to provide a 5.4% COLA for these employees. The proposed 5.4 COLA represents or reflects rather an alignment with the cost of living, the consumer price index, with a modest 0.5% bump to recognize the hard work of staff through some very difficult times, such as the pandemic and the drought. And so, you know, staff has demonstrated commitment and agility during these times, and we really just would like for them to be recognized. So this proposed resolution is only for COLA for 1 year. We will bring other terms and conditions for the resolution at a later date after we have ratified the contract with the union. So with that, staff asks that the board approve this resolution or amendment to the resolution.
Thank you, Vicky.
Mhm.
Board comments. Larry?
It's cool with me.
Jed?
Yeah, I guess I'd say I've thought a lot about this. I'm supportive of this move. I would much prefer that we were aligned on timing with our represented employee negotiations, and I'm ready to approve this with the notion that this will help move closure as quickly as possible on both sides for the remaining items in the unrepresented and all the remaining items in the represented. So I'd love to move as quickly as we can. I think after some contemplation, this actually may help get us there quicker. And so I'm supportive.
No, I'm going to echo the comments of this is not the first choice in the way of doing this. This would have been, I think, a lot smoother, and I think just better practice to be able to bring both the MOU for the represented folks and this for the unrepresented folks. However, we're in the spot we're in right now, and I'd like to see it move forward and wrap up faster for the represented as well. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to hold back on the unrepresented folks, the ones that have not been part of this process to this point, and they deserve to be recognized for the work they're doing as well. So I'd like to support it, but I don't think this is an individual action. We need to move forward on the MOU, and we need to close this up because we've got a lot of work to do. We want to put this one behind us.
I agree.
I'll just echo all the comments that have been made. This is not the order that I think we wanted to see these agreements, but the remaining outstanding issues are, I think, there's hard work, I think, going on. I think that on all sides of the effort of trying to reach agreement, there's real and honest, good faith efforts to work out issues, and it's just taking more time. But I think that this hopefully helps move things along. And I think out of fairness for those that aren't part of those negotiations, and especially after a very impactful inflation-driven past year, I think it's unfair to keep people waiting, because I think that this is important from people on a personal level financially. But I do hope that this actually leads us to making progress very fast to move forward with a win-win agreement with our union. Okay. No other board comments. Can we have can I get a resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Are there any public comments?
Yes, there is one that we have, Miss 1402. Go ahead, 1402.
James Holmes Larkspur, it wasn't clear to me whether the rank and file will get a retroactive increase, and therefore there will be no difference than if the increases had been at the same time here. But that aside, I just wonder why treat the unrepresented employees more generously than the represented employees. It was also suggested that hopefully this will make the negotiations move quicker. But I hope that the rationale for giving them an earlier increase is not to avoid the managers making concessions in the negotiations in order to accelerate their own increases. But in any event, it just seems to me that in general, if the rank and file can wait, the managers can wait too. And that is especially the case in the wake of these tremendous rate increases, when it would seem that the board would want to take every step to conserve as much money as they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton Smith, please. Mr. Clayton.
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Oh, this provokes me to ask the question, when is it ever going to happen that government employees who we must pay for end up sharing in the pain of the rest of us who suffer the inflationary consequences without any mitigation? And these inflationary consequences are always, as Milton Friedman pointed out many years ago, the consequence of government excess deficit spending. That's where the inflation comes from. And so here we have the government created inflation, government insulating itself from the inflation it creates for its employees, and the rest of the people are left to fend for themselves. And I think it's an ethical and moral question that everyone who works for the government, no matter what you're doing, should take a little moment in time to think about. Because in a way, yes, we have this need for the water and all the rest. But I think that you should consider the people whose taxes, and I've just noticed my own water bill, are left to pay for it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Can we get a roll call vote?
Yes. Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Sampson.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
And President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us on to agenda item number 10, the 2023 annual goals update. It's an informational item.
Excuse me. Good evening, board. We can go to the next slide. This is an update on the annual goals that were developed at the start of the year and that we reviewed again in March. This time we're providing a qualitative assessment as indicated on the right, kind of these little stoplights. Green is on schedule or completed, yellow on track or slight delay to the schedule, and red would be a major reset to the goal. You'll find that they aren't all green, which in my view is a good thing because it means that we stretched ourselves in developing the goals. And as you know, it's not excuses, just factually, these goals are in addition to the routine work that we all have in this organization. And for me, what we did in the report outs is really beginning to institutionalize this process for this organization of annually identify key initiatives that we want to track and accomplish through the year. So with that, Terry. So we'll hit the sections. Website improvements are moving forward. Slight shift in the schedule. The agenda management system, which is really one of the exciting initiatives that Adrian's working on. That's a real kind of a customer facing benefit where people will be able to pull discrete items from the agenda without navigating the whole packet and many other benefits. And it's being worked on, and next month we'll likely be able to see it. Number of outreach, I was looking at this and these were the identified at the time, but there's so much more. And an example, Pine Mountain Tunnel, right now, a tremendous amount of work in communications, coordinating the project we just heard about. And storytelling collateral is an ongoing work in progress. And as I go through this, I'm trying to move at a pretty good clip. Feel free to ask any questions. We have folks here that we can dig into any of these that we need to. Engineering, what we're sticking to the plan of developing a 10 and 30-year CIP to look kind of visionary, likely in some way, coordinating it with the strategic plan that's underway. The IT strategic plan, very important effort. You are aware we had a shift with our IT manager that did cause a bit of a delay, as you see in those schedules, to develop and finalize the IT strategic plan. The ERP, essentially for us, it's our SAP upgrade conversion, a lot of work. Again, a slight shift in the schedule, in part with the IT manager and others, but we are committed to certainly moving forward with that. And the board is going to get an update in September on kind of how we can think about the SAP conversion with AMI. That's an outstanding question that has come for the board, and that'll come before you. So various phases, and we're at this point maintaining the go live date in that conversion. Ambitious date. The help desk service contract we've talked about, and this is a pilot in terms of how we accomplish that. And next month, we are going to be reporting out to the board on how that pilot went and recommendations going forward. And the district paving program, again, a slight shift, but we are moving forward, and we do have a update presentation scheduled. Is that September, Crystal? Do we know? September. So we'll be coming back to the board with an update on where we are in the paving program and the costs that we have talked about. Human resources, a lot of activity going on. We did transition to the new recruitment platform that appears to be paying dividends in terms of the scope of the candidates that we receive, and kind of ongoing kind of improved documentation and linkages that help with the process. the DEI program that we've talked to the board, that we did have the SLT training and employee work group was kicked off in July. And we're still planning to launch to all staff in December. The online performance management tool, we're essentially complete. A couple more bugs we got to get through. The 360 performance evaluations that we've talked about. Part of the bugs that we've worked through have caused the delays, but we do have these revised dates that we're feeling good about, and we will strive very hard to meet those dates that are currently on there. Employee engagement, a number of issues here, new dedicated position, which the board authorized in this budget. We do need to find its way in the queue for recruitment and bring that position on board, which then will roll to developing a broad training program that shifted a bit as well. We are planning to launch, as we talked about, another employee engagement survey by the end of the year. And we're developing communication protocols for all the work groups in the district and plan to have that in place by December. Lastly, we have talked about tonight the delay in what we expected to have the collective bargaining agreement in place, but we are working hard and we have heard the board with the interest to get that across the finish line. Watershed, you've gotten a lot of update on these activities. The BIFUP is going kind of according to plan. We've the board approved the EIR addendum to give us help with more capacity. And we did apply for a block grant to help with the funding to accelerate some of the work. Lagunitas Creek enhancement. You got a good briefing recently at a watershed committee, really great work going on, kind of continuing the enhancement work that we've done over the years and really building on that. Azalea Hill Trail restoration is moving forward in a strong way, including getting grants to support that effort. And the recreation management plan, again, a slight shift there, but what we are looking at December to have the draft plan in front of the board. And water resources, I think this is maybe the last one here. Of course, we just had the briefing here with the first bullet of getting consultants on board by September. And then following that, we'll have a detailed schedule and approach for how the work is going to commence. And the near-term actions, as you heard tonight and you're well aware of, are already well underway. Conservation master plan, again, by the end of the year, we hope to have that complete. The water loss review, you heard a brief update tonight. You'll get, we do expect December to have that completed. I certainly anticipate there'll be an interim briefing or two to the board prior to that time. And as you've heard numerous times, really aggressive work towards conservation in a host of ways. And finance, we did complete the budget rate setting, that small effort that finance led. And I'm joking, Brett, of course, really a Herculean effort. And connection fee update, which is a key initiative that we are looking at, get that done in early 2024, hopefully. And then begin updating some key finance policies coming up. And the first one I believe you'll be seeing is on reserves and debt management, but the others will follow. So we'll, in terms of next step, continue progress on these goals as we start continue developing the 5-year strategic plan. I think you all have been contacted, and then we'll start rolling things out at board meetings and get to the hard work of that. In December, we'll come back with the final where we stood with these annual goals. And in future years, right, this is really the exciting part. We'll nest the annual goals under the strategic plan, right? Strategic plan will be a foundation. We'll have annual goals informed by the strategic plan and kind of really institutionalize again what we're doing in terms of these annual goals. So with that, any questions?
Board comments, questions? Matt?
I'm super appreciative that you, first of all, put the goals so clearly out in the beginning of the year. You followed up and you reported on how you're doing. So kudos to your management style. Appreciate it.
Larry, anything?
Nope.
This is really helpful. It's a great quick review. It's great that we started off with these and it really helps us to track things and for our customers to be able to see the progress and all the work that we're doing. I think that as you did note, there's a lot of yellows, a lot of slips of near-term goals, and I think obviously at the launch of a lot of initiatives, it's oftentimes a reckoning of what it means to lift off a lot of initiatives. So I understand the reasoning behind that. And I know that we are also in the process of bringing on a lot of staff that we lost during the pandemic and for that few years. So hopefully that added capacity of bringing us back to our normal staffing levels will help with a lot of the ambitious efforts that are ongoing. And I want to make sure in terms of the frequency that you'll come back with this, because this is really, really helpful. Are we considering these quarterly, or did you have an idea behind that?
Yeah, I was thinking quarterly, just where we are now. I'm thinking November, December kind of as a concluding one. And then, rolling into the development of the next year's goals. And some may need to be carried. I do want to kind of note my appreciation generally for the boards, seeing a lot of yellow with the understanding. What I've seen happen before, if there's a push to meet all the schedules, you get schedules out of the gate that will definitely be met, and you don't stretch the organization. So for me, a balanced, even if there were some reds, to me, it's okay, because I do want staff to be comfortable stretching and being ambitious on things that may or may not be met. So overall, and I do appreciate, because everyone is very busy, but they are, in addition to everything going on, focused on getting these key goals and initiatives done and moving forward.
Okay. Are there any public comments?
Yes, there is one. Mr. Larry Minikes, please.
Yes, I do hope as part of this process that the board would take a look and revisit its mission and its vision and consider updating it, particularly in the light of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, that brings us to our final agenda item, future meeting schedule. Terry.
Hi, so this week, the fun doesn't stop just tonight. We keep going tomorrow morning, the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee meeting at 9:30. This Friday, we'll have the Operations Committee meeting at 9:30 also. Next week, and I forgot to add this because based upon your last closed session, you guys had decided to do August 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. Wednesday, August 23rd at 4:30 is a closed session. Then the following day, Thursday, August 24th, is the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. The only external meeting I'm aware of that's coming up is the North Bay Watershed Association meeting on September 1st. And that's my report.
Okay, lots more work ahead of us this month. Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn to a closed session, and we will return estimated around 9:30.
Are there any public comments on the closed session, Terry?
There are none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. We have closed session adjourned at 9:44 with no reportable actions. And with that, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you.